In the 1920s and early 1930s, Moscow was alive with creativity. Writers, poets, and playwrights gathered in cafés and salons, sharing ideas, performing works, and exchanging thoughts about art, society, and revolution. Among them was Isaac Babel, a writer with a sharp eye and sharper words, a storyteller whose short stories, especially the Red Cavalry series, captured the brutality and chaos of war with astonishing clarity. His work was admired at home and abroad. In Europe, and even in America, Babel was recognized as a literary talent of the first order. Babel's words celebrated the human spirit, exposed the horrors of war, and brought the soul of Russia to life on the page. He mingled with fellow intellectuals, actors, and artists, a rising star in Moscow's cultural world. But in Stalin's Soviet Union, brilliance could be dangerous. The regime demanded obedience, conformity, and loyalty above all else. Even a celebrated writer could become a threat if he dared to depict the truth too vividly. Stalin watched intellectuals closely. Writers were scrutinized, conversations were reported, and literary circles were infiltrated by the NKVD. Art was no longer art, it was propaganda or a crime. And Babel, with his penetrating observations and unflinching portrayals, had drawn the attention of the tyrant. He could not know that his fame, even across the ocean in America, would offer him no protection. In the eyes of Stalin, talent was irrelevant. Every mind that could think independently was a potential enemy. So Babel continued to write, to dream, to create, oblivious that the very regime he once admired would soon see his genius not as a gift, but as a threat. And in the shadow of Stalin's paranoia, that shadow would soon fall, dragging one of Russia's brightest literary stars into darkness. Even a brilliant mind like Isaac Babel's could not escape the shadows of Stalin's paranoia. By the mid-1930s, the NKVD had infiltrated every corner of Moscow: literary cafés, theater halls, and publishing houses. Whispers traveled quickly, and no conversation was safe. Babel began to notice subtle changes. Editors who once praised his work hesitated. Colleagues looked away when he entered the room. Even close friends avoided him, fearing a casual remark might be reported. Every literary salon became a gauntlet. Writers and intellectuals self-censored, fearing that a joke, a critique, or a vivid description could be twisted into a crime. Babel felt it too. The weight of invisible eyes, the ever-present threat of denunciation. Rumors circulated. Who had been arrested last week? Who had disappeared after a brief questioning? In Stalin's world, knowledge could be deadly. The NKVD didn't need proof. A hint, a suspicion, a denunciation from a frightened colleague, enough to destroy a life. And the most terrifying part? Even international fame, praise in America, or recognition abroad meant nothing. Babel's work, celebrated in literary circles worldwide, could not shield him from Stalin's fear of independent thought. Every page he wrote, every play he staged, was under scrutiny. And under the watchful eye of the state, creativity became a risk, a crime waiting to be declared. Babel continued to write, but the freedom he once knew was gone. Every word carried weight. Every sentence could be used against him. In Stalin's Soviet Union, even a mind like Isaac Babel's, brilliant, daring, admired, was never safe. And soon, that surveillance would turn into something far more terrifying. It was a cold night in Moscow, 1939. The city slept under a heavy blanket of fear. But in one modest apartment, a brilliant writer sat at his desk, unaware that the NKVD had already chosen him as a target. The knock came sharply, echoing through the hallway. 3 men in dark coats waited outside, their breath forming clouds in the freezing air. Isaac Babel opened the door, and in an instant, his life changed forever. The agents read the charges: anti-Soviet agitation and espionage. No explanation, no warning, no chance for defense. Babel was immediately handcuffed and led away, leaving behind manuscripts, friends, and the city that had once celebrated him. During the ride to the NKVD headquarters, Babel realized the truth. Fame, talent, and international recognition could not protect him. In Stalin's Soviet Union, everyone was expendable, even those whose words were celebrated in America. The interrogation began almost immediately. Babel faced endless questioning, isolation, and psychological torment. The NKVD demanded confessions of crimes he had never committed. Every question was a trap. Every silence could be construed as guilt. He was forced to admit to espionage, anti-Soviet activities, and conspiracies, fabrications dictated by the state. Torture, both physical and psychological, became routine. Sleep deprivation, threats to friends and family, endless hours of questioning, all designed to break the spirit. Yet even under the relentless weight of Stalin's machinery, Babel remained resolute in his mind. He knew the accusations were false, but the system demanded a confession, and refusal meant death. In that moment, Babel's fate was sealed. The state had claimed another brilliant mind. The pen, once his instrument of expression, could not save him from the hammer of Stalin's paranoia. And outside the walls of that interrogation room, the world would continue to admire his work, unaware that the man behind the words had been destroyed by the dictator he once served. Isaac Babel's arrest was only the beginning. In Stalin's Soviet Union, arrest alone was not enough. The state demanded a story, a confession, a narrative that painted him as an enemy of the people. Babel was charged with espionage, anti-Soviet agitation, and conspiracy. None of it was true. Every accusation was carefully fabricated, designed to justify the state's violence and reinforce the dictator's image of omnipotence. Under intense psychological pressure, Babel endured endless interrogations. He was forced to name co-conspirators, to admit to crimes he had never committed. The NKVD twisted words, invented evidence, and engineered confessions that the court would later parrot as fact. Even international fame offered no protection. The literary world admired him in America, yet Stalin's regime dismissed recognition as irrelevant. Talent was a threat, and a talented mind that could think independently was a danger to absolute power. Babel's trial, if it could be called that, was a performance of terror. It existed not to find truth, but to instill fear in the hearts of others. The verdict was predetermined. The purpose was obedience, submission, and the complete erasure of independent thought. By the time the sentence was delivered, Babel was already a ghost. His identity, his talent, his very existence, reduced to a cautionary tale in Stalin's machinery of fear. The show trial was more than punishment. It was a statement to the world. No one, no matter how talented, celebrated, or admired abroad, was beyond Stalin's reach. Creativity, intellect, and art were not treasured. They were monitored, controlled, and crushed if they dared to exist outside the dictator's will. Isaac Babel's words would survive. The man himself would not. Isaac Babel never left the NKVD's shadow. In 1940, he was executed, a victim of fabricated charges, of Stalin's paranoia, of a system that saw independent thought as a crime. His name was erased from publications. His friends were silenced. His genius, celebrated in America and across Europe, was hidden from his own countrymen. Babel's story was not unique. Writers, artists, and intellectuals across the Soviet Union lived in constant fear. Some were imprisoned, some were tortured, some vanished without a trace. The state did not merely kill bodies, it destroyed creativity, imagination, and spirit. International acclaim could not save him. No awards, no literary praise, no admiration abroad mattered. Stalin's regime demanded total control over thoughts, words, and art itself. And yet, his work survived. Babel's words, once suppressed, would eventually return to the world, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. But the lesson of his life remains. Under a tyrant like Stalin, even brilliance could be a death sentence. The persecution of intellectuals and artists was not only an attack on individuals, it was a strike against knowledge, imagination, and freedom. It was Stalin's way of ensuring that only obedience, fear, and loyalty remained. Isaac Babel's fate was a warning to every thinker, every writer, every artist. In Stalin's Soviet Union, creativity was a crime, truth was a danger, and talent was expendable. The shadows of terror stretched long, leaving behind fear that outlived the tyrant himself. And that is the dark side of power.